much. Want to bring in now retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kampfer. Hal, it's always good to have you, and we have a lot to get to. You just heard John Kirby there say significant military force. We've been seeing this headline all day long. A full invasion is imminent. What does that mean to you, Hal? What do you think that might look like?
Joe, what I'm looking at is when the lights literally go off, when we lose communications with Ukraine. We're already seeing the first, what I would call prep fires, if you will, preparatory fires, which are interestingly in the cyber domain. We're seeing cyber attacks. We're seeing disinformation being put out online of made-up atrocities the Russians put out. This is all the preparation of what I would call the information terrain, the information environment. But at some point, we're going to see the kinetics kick off, and I fully expect to see a mix of cyber with that, where you start seeing the lights turning off, cell phone communications going out, and that could happen at any time now. They are in their battle positions, they're ready to go.
Well, I hear full-scale invasion, Hal, and I think troops coming across from Belarus into Kyiv, missiles flying into Kyiv, or is this going to primarily be in the eastern part of Ukraine, do you think?
Joe, that's a big question right now. Where you look at where he's positioned, and if I just looked at it in terms of what the orders are, or at least the reports of what the orders are to the tactical commanders on the ground that the Russians have, we would have to assume that they're going to come in all around. They're going to come from the south, they're going to come from the east, and they're going to come down from Belarus. Now, what you're going to see is a variety of different things. You'll see some advanced armored reconnaissance elements, then you'll see larger elements, and then you'll see the main force. And what the Ukrainians are going to have to do is, and I have no doubt they're ready for this, is they're going to have a series of battle positions that they fall back on. They're going to have to trade terrain in order to get kinetic kills, in order to take out vehicles, in order to inflict casualties on the Russians. And really the strategy of the Ukrainian military is to inflict as much battle damage on the Russians for every square meter, or for every meter, for every mile that they take in the Ukraine, because that is the vulnerabilities the Russians have. They only have so many forces. They don't have a big reserve that they can bring in beyond what they have. So they want to cause heavy attrition with those forces, with the idea that that may demoralize the forces and maybe push things into a stalemate.
So let's say there is a full invasion, Hal. Then what? Who's there to help the Ukrainians? Or are they on their own?
Well, officially, you're not going to see NATO come in. NATO will not be sending in forces. You will see no U.S. presence in Ukraine. Covertly, and normally in things like this, and what we like to say is covert action always works best in support of overt policy. And this is one of those situations. You're going to see a lot of support for Ukraine. You're currently seeing a lot of support for Ukraine, but I imagine you're going to continue to see economic aid, humanitarian aid, and you're going to see weapons and other things coming in to assist the Ukraine forces, which at that point may become militia forces at some point, resisting the Russians for a very, very long time, years.
We're all guessing on this stuff, Hal. Obviously, only Putin knows what will happen and when. But let's say that this doesn't happen like in a shock and awe type of way, where we all know, okay, it's on and it's underway. And let's say that he just tries to extend his reach in these eastern regions, that he's declared independent. Do you think Ukraine can hold that line there?
Actually, if Putin, and I don't know who's coming up with his overall strategy, but what he could do and what he has done is he's arrayed his forces everywhere, which makes it very difficult for Ukraine to move its forces around because they're under threat from every angle. With that, still, I think the most likely scenario is you'll see something to link up Crimea with that Donbas region, expand into those two provinces, and then run down the coastline of the Sea of Azov to make that land bridge go into Crimea and seize that eastern region. That would make the most sense to me, but with his language, the way he explained things on Monday, and of course the confusion with his U.S. ambassador, what he said Sunday, and even his head of security services said on Monday, I'm not quite sure that that he won't go for the whole thing.
Wow. Well, if Ukraine can't defend the Donbas region, how in the world can they defend the entire country?
Well, actually, the Donbas region is probably the most difficult area to defend. I think they're going to trade terrain for, again, kinetic kills against Russian forces as they try to expand beyond that forward line of troops that they're currently at. I think that's going to happen. But actually, the further you get into Ukraine, the longer that logistics train, the longer that supply line, the more difficult it is to support those mechanized forces moving across Ukraine. It's a huge country. It's like Texas. It's gigantic. The further they get in, the more vulnerable they become. And I think that's where the Ukraine military may have a slight advantage in that scenario.
Hal, I'm trying to visualize this, and it's pretty scary. I mean, you war game these things out all the time, but the idea of missiles flying over Kyiv, it's frightening to think of how this might go down. I've read reports today that in order for Russia to take Kyiv, they will have to essentially leave it in ruins. Do you agree with that?
If they want to physically take Kyiv, and keep in mind that there's been a lot of time to build a defense in depth, they have to throw overwhelming firepower and overwhelming forces. They have to have a 3 to 5 to 1 ratio of forces in the offense against defenders with a well-prepared urban defensive laydown. And frankly, I think they're going to leave Kyiv in ruins. Now, if they do that politically, that's going to be seen. That's going to get out on television in Europe and elsewhere. If you see a major European city being destroyed by the Russians, I think you're going to see European nations, European capitals coalesce like we haven't seen since really World War II in terms of the alliances.
Well, it's frightening to even talk about, Hal, and we appreciate you shedding some light and your insight. It's always great to have you. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. Hoorah, Joe.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.